Back in 2021, I chose that year to keep continually reading through the book of Daniel. So I'd read about one chapter a day. When I got to the end, the next day I'd start back at the beginning. During that time, I got intrigued by Daniel chapter 11. I'll tell you why. That is a chapter that at the time Daniel received it, it was prophecy for him, but a good portion of it is now fulfilled. So it's like this little mini work laboratory where you can go in and see, okay, this is what God said, and this is what actually happened. And I was intrigued at that to see how God works with his prophecies and how they end up being fulfilled. And here we have this nice little concise laboratory here to work in. As other fulfilled prophecies in the Bibles, you have all the prophecies of Christ. I mean, we knew where he was going to be born. We know what family he was going to be born in. We knew about what time he was going to be born in because of what Daniel had said. To me, it's not so amazing the wise men found Daniel, is that the priests mixed it and totally got lost in the process. But here we have a nice, concise thing where the prophecies of Christ are all scattered around. So my plan is to look at a passage in Daniel, chapter 11, review the history, and see how it matched up to the prophecy. So you might have to think a little tonight. Most of you look like you're awake. We'll see if I can fix that. And we will go on there. So, most of you don't need this, but just make me feel like I did a good job teaching. Let me back up a little and look at the book of Daniel. It's 12 chapters, and you can take the book and divide it real easily right in the middle, between Daniel 6 and 7. Chapters 1 through 6 are all those things, to borrow the term we've had around here, the flannel graph stories, the wonderful things that make Sunday school lessons for the kids. Okay, we have in there Daniel getting captured and then brought in and not eating the king's food. We have Nebuchadnezzar's dream that he interpreted. We have the fiery furnace that his friends were put into. We have Nebuchadnezzar's own vision that's actually recorded from him. We have the writing on the wall story. And we have the lion's den story. But the last half of the book is all prophecies. And it breaks down like this. Chapter 8 is the vision of the four beasts, where each beast represents the next upcoming world empire. Chapter 9 is a look at that with the ram and the goat and the little horn. But then the last 3 chapters is one prophecy, and this one is a little different. An angel, possibly pre-incarnate Christ, speaks to Daniel directly and gives him the revelation that way. And chapter 10 is the whole thing of Daniel meeting we'll call him an angel tonight, and gets kind of physically wiped out, thrown on his face. He has to recover from all that. And then 11, we start in with a prophecy, and most of that is the fulfilled prophecies. At the end, depending how you interpret things, we actually break into what's prophecy for us that's not fulfilled yet. So, let's dive right in. Daniel chapter 11. And we will look at verse 2, which I am naming the 4 remaining kings of Persia. So it's a simple verse. And I will show thee a truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength and through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. So, if you break that down to bullet points, I'm a bullet point kind of guy. There will be 4 Persian kings. That's pretty easy. Left here, as long as Persia remains a world empire. The last one's going to be the richest king of them all. He will be against Greece. So we'll see somehow he was against Greece. And, jumping ahead. So that is the prophecy. 4 kings, last one being the riches. And if you look at your handout, or even up there on the board, sure enough, when we look in history, guess what? There were 4 kings yet before Greece became the world power. I got their names there, which I will not try to pronounce. I have the dates they started their rule. And I thought we may want to look there at that last one, because you probably have familiarity with that one. That one would have been Esther's husband, if you remember the story of Esther at all. He has another name, Xerxes or Ahasuerus. Somebody want to try that better? So he's Esther's husband, related back to that story. He gained control all the way there from Egypt to India in his conquest. And he had a few different revolts while he was there in the farther away kingdoms that he ended up squashing with his army. When he did that, he took a lot of pillage and plunder. And he had several large building projects he started during his time. And then he decided he was going to build himself an army to go out and attack Greece. He spent 3 years doing that. And at the time, it was the most powerful army in the world. He went off to fight Greece and lost, had to come back defeated. So let's take a look at our list. It said there was going to be 4 Persian kings. We looked at our list. Sure enough, 4 Persian kings, literal kings. The last one was the richest, by far, as near as the historians can tell for us too. And he was against Greece. So we see that there. That passage is fully fulfilled. Checked off all the boxes. Next one I'm calling the Mighty King. So let's go ahead and read verses 3 and 4 now. And a mighty king shall stand up and shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his prosperity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. So if you read through that, what kind of bullet points do you pick out? The ones I picked out: rule with a great dominion, fulfill his will. Seems like nothing could stop this guy. When he died, his kingdom will be divided into 4 parts. So it won't stay together after he dies. And none of his kingdom will be ruled by his prosperity. Instead of what most kings do, where the king's son becomes your next king, barring any battles or takeovers or espionage or all those other intriguing stories, he didn't. In this case, that will not happen. And the kingdom will not be joined again. So after this great empire was built together and he dies, it gets divided up, never to become a full kingdom again. It stays split up. Anybody want to take a guess at who this is? He's mouthing it to me. Yeah. This is what we know as Alexander the Great. So here's the history behind that. Well, if you're interested, he correlates the bronze belly and thighs in the vision there that King Nebuchadnezzar had, and he correlates to the winged leopard in another one of the visions. So Alexander the Great ruled from 334 to 324, and those are BC dates going backwards, of course. During his rule, he captured Asia Minor, Syria, Egypt, and the whole area that had already been taken over by the Persian Empire, basically ruling the whole world from Greece to India, all the way across the known rule. He's been quoted as saying that after he did all this, he cried because there wasn't any known civilizations to conquer again. He was kind of out of what he wanted to do. And he did all this by age 30. Manage that. So that's our great leader there. But his succession, well, when you die at 30, you don't leave behind an adult son usually. Matter of fact, the only son he had wasn't born yet. His wife was pregnant. She hadn't had the first son yet, so he does not have a successor by normal rank and division that you get with a king. So, and there isn't even a boy king someone can set up and say, this is your king, and be the chancellor along beside him, or whatever they call that person there. Don't even have that to work with. So after some fighting back and forth and some different attempts, within a few years, the kingdom does get divided. And how's that look? All right. So we have our map there, and Seth, you may want to put the map as full screen for our people online here for a while. There are the 4 kingdoms. Yes, okay. So we got 2 little kingdoms over here. This purple area, even though it's in 2 parts, became one of them. This up here is another one. But our main focus for the rest of the night is going to be this large, what do you want to call that, tan? And this one down here, the dark brown one. So the top one is Syria. And in Daniel's prophecies here, that's always referred to the kingdom of the north. The bottom one is Egypt, which in the prophecy is always referred to the kingdom of the south. Now, looking at that map, anybody want to venture a guess why those 2 would be important to a Jew? Some of you are shaking your heads. Yep, that's because right on their border is Israel. So whenever they go to war between each other, they pass through Israel different times. So that was the reason we see a lot of it here in Daniel chapter 11. When you're casually reading it, like I was for my devotions, you hear these kings of the north, kings of the south going back and forth as you read the verses. You quickly get lost in the pronouns as to who's doing what. So to try and help you out, I have part 2 of the handout, which is a list of the different kings there of the northern kingdom, Syria, and the southern kingdom, Egypt. So if you get lost listening to me, you can look on there and see where we are. So let's check on our mighty king guy here again. Then you probably want to go back to normal view, Seth. Did this king, Alexander the Great, rule with great dominion and fulfill his will? Yeah, he took over all the known world at the time. So we'll check that off. Was the kingdom divided into 4 parts? Well, yes, lo and behold, it was divided into 4 parts. Of any of those 4 parts, did he have a successor that ruled? No. His generals fought over it, but no prince came in and took over, or anybody he appointed to be the successor. Matter of fact, he's been quoted as saying, when someone asked him, who's going to be your successor, he said, well, the strongest guy will be my successor. So he doesn't sound like he had much of a plan. And so we can check off that one. And the last one there, yes, the kingdom has not been brought together ever in history. It has always remained divided one way or another between then and however you draw the modern map now into 4 different parts. Never come back together. It probably won't till the millennium. All right. That was the second one. From here on out, I need to cherry pick, I think, because there are a lot of different things going on in the rest of this chapter, and I don't think we want to be here till midnight or 2 o'clock, right? Anybody want to stay? I'm leaving on vacation at 8 o'clock in the morning, so I don't want to stay either. So I will have to cherry pick. Please forgive me as we move on. My next one that I picked, I'm calling a diplomatic marriage. I think there's a better term, but I couldn't come up with it at the time. So you know all these things where one marriage estate, they send off the daughter or somebody to marry the other kingdom, and then the kingdoms are supposed to be joined. That's what we have going on here. I'm surprised nobody's made a modern movie of it, because it's quite the, it reads like one of those nighttime soap operas they used to have back in the 80s. So to illustrate it here, well, let's read the passage. It is verses 6 through 9. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of her arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and they that begot her, and he that strengthened her in those times. But of a branch of her root shall stand up one in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. And shall also carry captives away into Egypt, and their goods, and their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come to his kingdom, and shall return to his own land. So let's pick a few bullet points out of that one, see if we can cover it. The southern king will give his daughter to the king of the north as a wife. Diplomatic marriage won't succeed. It's going to fail. We will not get diplomacy. We will not get joined states. We will not get peace because of this marriage. A relative of this daughter/wife is going to come back in a successful military assault on the northern kingdom. And the southern king will outlast the northern king. So if we look at history, yes, we find people that fulfill this. There are their names. Antiochus II, who you'll find on your list there, from the northern kingdom. And the daughter given to be the queen there is Bernice. And then down in the southern kingdom, we have Ptolemy III. If I correctly got this right, the P in Ptolemy is silent. So that doesn't confuse you. So to illustrate this, I got my cute little characters to do it. I have my little stick figures. Hopefully you can read them better than I can on the back screen. Yes. So our king at the north of this time is Antiochus II. All these guys like to then pick another third name, and they're not usually very modest. This guy picked Theos, which means God, because he wanted people to worship him. Yep. And in the bottom, we have Ptolemy II, and I'm not going to try the name he chose for himself, and he has his daughter there, Bernice. So, yes, the plan is give Bernice up there to Antiochus, and we will have peace between our two kingdoms for as long. Oh, and there is a side deal to this. Any children that Bernice has out of this is going to be considered heir to the throne in the northern kingdom. Sounds like a peaceful situation is going to come out of this. One problem. Antiochus is already married. He is married to, let's see if I can say this right, Laodicea. Laodicea? Anybody got a better try? I actually listened to the computer how to pronounce this, and I still can't remember. So, simple solution. We send her away. According to the history book, she gets her own little estate where she should be happy the rest of her life and go on. And then we can take Bernice up here, and she can marry Antiochus, and the plan is put in motion. Yeah. Well, the shunned wife there comes in and kills Bernice. So she is out of the picture now, and then they can get back together. So far it doesn't look like our marriage here is working out the way we wanted it to. But it gets worse, because this Laodicea then poisons her husband. So now he's out of the way, and that gives her the chance to install her son as the new king of the north, king of Syria. Well, that's how that worked out. Why do I have one more? Oh, getting there. Ptolemy II dies, natural causes. His son takes over. Ptolemy III takes over. So he's in charge now, who is the brother, of course, of Bernice. And he mounts a military coup on the northern kingdom. and manages to kill Laodicea. This really sounds interesting. I'm just surprised they haven't made a movie of it yet. You know, you could really do something with this. So that's where our poor story ends here. So looking at the bullet points in the prophecy, yes, southern king gave the daughter to the northern king as a wife. That much happened. Diplomatic marriage didn't work. I don't think it worked for anybody. I think they all died. A relative of the wife will mount a successful military assault on the northern kingdom. Sure enough, Ptolemy III came in, took over. He didn't capture the country. Maybe he had them under tribute for a while or something, because good old number 2 up there in the south, in the north, was still king after he got done, but he made his main goal there of wiping out the person that killed the sister. And if you look at the dates there on your paper, the different kings, sure enough, the southern king here outlasted the northern king. So Ptolemy III outlast Seleucus II. So we can check off all the things we can find in that passage of Daniel again. Moving on, the next thing I cherry-picked, the great persecutor. And we will read that. So we are reading Daniel chapter 11, verses 29 to 32. And at the time appointed shall return and come towards the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the later. For the ships of Shittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved and returned and have indignation against the holy covenant, and shall do, even he shall return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. And arms shall stand on his part, and he shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. And he shall do wickedly against the covenant, shall he corrupt by flatteries. And as such as do wickedly against the covenant, shall he corrupt by flatteries. So we had to kind of jump into this, but here's another king of the north we're talking about. So the northern kingdom will attack the southern kingdom. Still going back and forth because our diplomatic marriage didn't work generations ago. The attack's going to fail because of a naval involvement somehow. Ships are going to come, and that's going to be the decisive factor in the war. And in fact, well, we'll find out when we get there. He will be against Israel, and he'll be against the Mosaic covenant. He will defile the temple somehow. He will stop the Mosaic sacrifices that happen in the temple. And he will place an abomination in the temple of some sort. So who is this person? Now, if you look at your sheets, this is Antiochus IV. Let's see what he did. Well, he planned an invasion of Egypt, which is the southern kingdom. He got there, but at that time, Egypt had made an alliance with the up-and-coming Roman Empire. So, southern kingdom, Egypt, asked for help from Rome, and Rome sends an army by ship. Lands there on the coast of Egypt. They form a line across there, and then the ambassador comes out there to Antiochus IV and says, well, do you want to attack or not? Antiochus says, well, let me think about it. And the ambassador says, okay. He gets out a stick. He traces a circle in the ground around Antiochus and says, give me your answer before you step out of the circle. Well, knowing he doesn't want to get in trouble with Rome, he says, okay, I will go back. So he leaves from getting ready to fight Egypt, and somewhere he gets the idea that Jerusalem is revolting, especially among the priests. And he, being a Hellenist, just pretty much would like to wipe out the Jewish religion, set up them to worship all the other gods there from the Greek. So he starts doing all sorts of things. First, he outlaws the Jewish practices, circumcision, the dietary rules they had, start getting rid of those. Their different feasts, make those illegal. He then gets so far as to go into the temple, not being a Jew, not being a priest, but a Greek, and offer a pig on the altar, which desecrates the altar. He then tries to force the high priest and the other officials to eat pork, which is an unclean animal for the priests. And then he sets up in the temple, takes away what we call the brazen altar, sets up another altar to their god Zeus. So now you can come and worship a Greek god in the temple. And we also find out while he's doing this, those that turn from Judaism and start following Hellenistic ways, the Greek god type ways, they get rewarded, the other people get persecuted. So, checking off our list, yeah, the northern king tried to attack the southern kingdom. Yes, a naval involvement is what turned the war. This guy was against Israel and the Mosaic covenant for sure. Before that, most of the time, whoever had control of Israel would let them still do their Jewish practices in the temple. He did defile the temple by putting a pig in there and altering that. He stopped the sacrifices. All the sacrifices they normally did in the temple, part of their worship, whatever was set up by Moses, he stopped those. And then he put in the other altar to one of the Greek gods. So we can check off everything on that list. My final little pick for tonight is the Revolt, what I'll name it. So picking up where we left off there in the middle of verse 32, in my translation there's like a colon after the word flatteries, and we're going to go down to verse 35. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits, and they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, by the flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. Now when they shall fall, they shall be a hold pin with little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries, and some of them of understanding shall fall to try and make and to try them and to purge them and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time. Now, there's several things here you could pick out. I hacked away at it and came up with this list that there's going to be those that know their God and they're going to do some sort of strong action, the exploits that was mentioned. Those that know God will instruct many. The instructors, or these people that know God, will suffer great persecution for doing that. Some will join the movement out of hypocrisy. And the persecution will last the appointed time. Hopefully we'll have time to look at that phrase. We have any great historians in here. This is what has been known as the Maccabean Revolt. At this time, and let me see if I can give you enough of the history of that to make it stand out. Matthias Maccabus was a Jewish priest. He was in a rural area as opposed to Jerusalem. The Greeks came in and decided today was the day. This area is going to offer a pig on their altar there. So Maccabeus was ordered to do it. He wouldn't do it. Another Jewish priest there said, okay, I'll do it. Maccabeus kills him and then kills the Greek general there that's trying to do that. Of course, that makes them criminals. He and his son run off into the mountains to hide. Matthias himself dies within a year in one of the battles they have. But they start this guerrilla-type unit that then can go around and pick on the Greek officials that have been planted around the country, trying to eradicate the Greeks out of their country and trying to regain control of the temple. It started out small, but it gets a lot of momentum. People start joining them. It gets to be quite a force. And he does manage to take back Jerusalem and the temple back in 164 BC. So they succeed at what they're doing that far. That action today is still celebrated by the Jews. They call it Hanukkah. Well, they still have that. Eventually, they gained full independence from the northern kingdom, from Greece there, because of what they were doing. To mention it, because it helps with our checklist, there was another movement besides them, the Hasdians. They wanted to restore the temple, but they weren't quite going as far as to take over politically the country. If they got their temple back, they were fine. So some of the times you see them grouped together in history write-ups. Some of the times they're separate. Try and keep that straight. And then we're going to talk about the appointed time in a little bit more detail here, I think. But let's check off our list. Those that knew God took strong action. Sure enough, they took strong action. Those that know God instruct many. And I went through the history that I could in the time I had to put this together, and I cannot find an actual record of them doing some sort of teaching event or teaching people, but you almost have to know what happened. So to be fair, I'm going to throw a question mark up there. But I don't know how you'd manage a revolt and get people behind you without training one way or another. The instructors will suffer great persecution. And yes, many of them died during this time. Got property seized. All sorts of different actions involved because Antiochus there was really fully into trying to get rid of Judaism. Then there's the phrase, some will join the moment out of hypocrisy. And someday maybe you can find somebody smarter than me than explain this one, because I couldn't find that either in history. Somehow it happened. I just can't tell you what it is, so we got to throw a question mark up there out of ignorance, not out of something saying otherwise against it. And then the persecution will last the appointed time. I'll check it off here, but let's look at that a little different. To do this, we can leave Daniel chapter 11 now. We need to go back to Daniel chapter 8, which is one of the other prophecies Daniel got. What we want is really in verse 14, but we got to back up to verse 12. So Daniel was having this vision. There were some angels that he was seeing that were talking. And let me pick up here in verse 12. Hopefully we can catch up. And the host was given him against this day daily sacrifice by reason of the transgression, and cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Then I heard one saint speaking, one of the people he saw in his vision, and another said unto the certain saint which spoke, how long will the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation to give both the sanctuary and the host be trodden underfoot? And he said unto me, 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, I read that out of the King James Bible I carried. We have anybody in here with a NASB? Can you take a good look in verse 14 again, where I have 2,300 days? What do you have? 2,300 evenings and mornings. The guys doing the King James Bible thought they were helping us out here. But it says mornings and evenings. So you would think at first reading that, yes, we're talking about the 2,300 full days. But what we're talking about here is the sacrifices in the temple. There was a morning sacrifice. There was an evening sacrifice. And we've missed 2,300 of those. So how many days is that? 1,150 days. And sure enough, if you use the Jewish calendar at the time and count up the days from when the temple was defiled until the Maccabean revolt got the temple back, restored it, and started having sacrifices again, anybody want to guess how many days that was? 1,150 days. Just like the Bible says. What do you know? So we've done this cherry picking here. We've picked out some. It would have been fun to do them all. But here we are. why in the world bother to do this and look at prophecy and see how it was fulfilled? Mainly so we can get an idea of how the other prophecies that God's given us about our future will be taken. We can say they're pretty much literal. Now you got to allow for the figures of speech, you got to allow for the imagery, but they're going to be literal. If God says 2,300 mornings and evenings, that's what it's going to be. If you got definite things like that to hang on, that's the way it's going to be. It's going to work out exactly the way God said it was going to be. The liberals that want to deny any sort of power of God, any sort of thing they can't see themselves, look at this passage and say, well, yeah, it all lines up with history, so obviously it must have been written later. And that's their excuse of how to explain this away. Well, first of all, the book of Daniel claims to be written by Daniel, or at least people that knew him and took it down or whatever, because this is his prophecies that he saw, it's his life and the other stories. And then when he comes along, he gives dates, usually related, the certain year of such and such a king's rule. So he's got dates in there of when he had these different events and had these different revelations. So if Daniel didn't write it, the book is a lie. But we have even something better than that. I'd like you to join me back in Matthew 24. So I got to jump ahead here to the New Testament. And we're going to be looking at verse 15. Assuming I don't get lost. Yep. And we got here Jesus' great prophetic chapter, where he's telling different prophetic events coming up. And in the middle of this, he gives a warning, where he says there in verse 15, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. So whosoever readeth it, let him understand." Now to help you out, something we didn't go in here with the rest of this chapter of chapter 11, we have Antiochus the fourth here being a prototype of the Antichrist coming in. And here Jesus is saying, when you see this desecration in the temple coming up, like it happened before, as recorded by the prophet Daniel. So Jesus claims, yes, the book of Daniel was written by Daniel. And yes, Daniel was a prophet. He was not a historian. So Jesus himself claims this book to be authentic prophecy. So we can then, with full assurance, go at it and look at it as fulfilled prophecy and see how God filled them. The liberals try and do things with taking the names of the instruments listed in that fiery furnace story and say, well, some of those are Greek names. That's the only Greek in the whole thing, but they latch onto that and say, well, obviously that was later, but there was Greek influence before, so it doesn't really hold up. So the only thing holding it up is just their fact that they can't believe it actually happened, that someone could prophesy with this detail at that time. So what do we rely on? Well, we got our own prophecies coming up. So if God says Christ is going to come in the sky and take us away, well, Christ will come in the sky and take us away. When God says he's going to send the great tribulation like's never been sent, he will send it. It will happen, just as sure as the history we've looked at. When God promises he's going to judge the wicked, they will be judged. We don't have to worry about vengeance. God's going to take care of that. It's going to happen. So we can fully trust God to do what he says he's going to do, which is good because our whole salvation is basically just built upon the Word of God. So that's what I'm trying to leave you with in that encouragement tonight, the trust that God will say what he's going to do. The only thing we have to worry about is making sure we're properly interpreting it the best we can.